Well, where I am now, it's a matter of loading up the car with lots of gear and supplies and food, and driving 2, 3, 4 hours to the coast, picking a spot, camping out there, and letting the hurricane come your way. Certainly, you're in communication with your station, and these days you've got your smartphone, so you can tell exactly where it is. Hurricanes are great for television in so many ways. Most of all, from my perspective, you may get 10 days to 2 weeks of notice before the hurricane hits, and it makes a picture perfect type thing for a TV crew to plant themselves out by the beach and wait for the hurricane to come to them, and that's precisely how we do it. The first couple of days you're there, it's just surfers and cops and looky-loos, and it's beautiful weather. It's another great day at the beach with something interesting to talk about. As the days progress, the weather gets bad, the locals leave, and it's just you and some surfers and the cops and the police department and the fire department, and there you ride out the storm. For years, so many times for a storm, say on the Outer Banks of North Carolina, all the satellite trucks would invariably gather at one place because all of the seaside hotels close, except there's always that one hotel that stays open for the media.
Yeah.
And therefore, you've got 12, 15 satellite trucks at one hotel on an island. And thus is the biggest collection of people on the whole island at the time. And you're there for a few days. And back in the day, it was like a concert parking lot, in that you could walk from one satellite truck to another and see old friends and hearty souls, and everyone was there with their best gear, and it was quite the time. Today, however, since it's fewer satellite trucks and more TVUs and Dejeros and live views, more backpack technology, the habit of clustering together isn't as much. Now you can spread out and go live from most anywhere.
Yeah.
Back in the day, you'd have to strategically park your satellite truck by the building, by the pier, in a place that wouldn't get flooded or wouldn't get the mast ripped off by high winds. These days, it's just, for the most part, carrying a backpack as long as you've got cell service.
Yeah.
But I have covered hurricanes and gone 3 to 5 days without eating hot food, just eating granola bars out of a cooler, because you'll get trapped on an island which will lose power, or the highway patrol will close the bridges. No matter how many times your news director calls you on the phone and says, cross the bridge, if there's an army of state troopers at either side of the bridge, well, you're not going anywhere. And I've had that experience before. You get really good at setting up places where the reporter can appear to be outside and the TV crew can be inside.
Oh, okay, like hotel balconies or something like that.
Yeah, the third floor hotel balcony is great, in that you can be, eating popcorn inside the room while the reporter is
they're
on the
hanging
balcony,
on for dear life,
looking where they're wind thrashed. Also, these hotels that stay open, it should be noted that the moment you check in and the moment they take your money, they say, by the way, we're killing power at noon. So you've got a hotel room, but there's no air conditioning.
Right.
And it's a hotel room full of sandy, gritty TV gear, and it can get uncomfortable and smelly. But I've covered most hurricanes. When the actual hurricane hit, for the most part, I have huddled in like the stairwells of beach hotels, because you're only going to cover so much of it as it hits. At some point, you have to take shelter. I would much rather spend 5 days at the beach informing viewers at how the hurricane's about to hit, and then have it not hit, and then have it skirt the shore. Because if and when the hurricane does hit, then the work begins.
Yeah.
People have no power. You have no power. There's a million stories everywhere of death and destruction. People get really tense. It's hot. It's thoroughly miserable, and what you're covering is miserable. So I always enjoy hurricanes that are all hat and no cattle, in that they come in fiercely but then magically skip away, and a lot of them do, or at least don't hit as hard as we expect. And I also want people to know that so many times if they see a local news reporter at the coast, lashed to a stick in horrible weather, I want the viewers to know that most probably that reporter threaten to stab her coworkers to get the chance to do that.
Right. Yeah.
You know, they think, oh my gosh, it's so terrible they send you out there, and you're like, yeah, well, most of us volunteered to be here,
Yeah.
and we can't fully explain that. It doesn't make sense, but when it's your job to document what happens around you, you want to be there.
Yeah.
And even as I've gotten older, I tell my wife the only thing worse than covering a hurricane is watching my friends do it without me. I want to be in the middle of it. I can't fully explain why. And I still have that urge 30 years into it. And I guess that's what keeps it interesting.
Yeah, I think that's what keeps us all going, that buzz, doesn't it? But, well, I've never covered an event like that. And I mean, let's say I got deployed to come over and cover one of these events. What tips would you give to me in terms of, what I should be thinking logistically, and then,
Right.
just practical tips for sort of filming in that sort of weather? Have you got any advice?
Yeah, trash bags.
Okay.
Trash bags and duct tape. I don't care how much money you spend on your high dollar camera rain cover. You're going to need that and more. So it's all a matter of trying to stay dry. And the gear makes it easier because it's more self-contained and smaller than ever before. I remember back in the day of 3/4 inch recordex, things that didn't even do good in humidity, did really poorly in hurricane conditions. I covered Hurricane Irma. It was a tropical storm by the time it hit Charleston, South Carolina, earlier this year. But we were down there, and at one point I was up to my waist in floodwater with the camera on my shoulder and a backpack on my back under 3 raincoats, trying to keep it dry because if things get wet, it's not going to do you much good. So it's all a matter of staying dry. Knowing what food to take, and that is just very easy to eat food that you normally wouldn't want to eat, things that won't go bad. What else? I think it's personal safety and not letting adrenaline get the best of you. There are things I did as a younger person I will no longer do. I used to not think twice about driving through high water, something you see a lot of in hurricanes when things flood and you're trying to get from one place to the other. In my 20s, I would just floor it and go. And today, I'm gonna pause a little bit before I do that. I would say, try and stay dry, but personal safety, and that is keeping your head on a swivel and knowing that nobody's got your back. Nobody.
Yeah.
So, protect yourself. Technically, again, it's a matter of keeping things as dry as possible, because during the storm, stations want 24/7 coverage, of course. They're not going to say you don't have to cover the storm because you're getting wet. It's all a matter of how long you can last before things get so bad that you can't. But I have been in experiences where my personal safety was not a top priority, and I've almost gotten in trouble being washed away by storms. So, it's the same old thing with a policeman. I guess they tell them, protect yourself, because if you're not there, you can't help others. And I know that's not a very technical answer, but you'd be amazed how many raincoats you can put on when it's up to your gear to stay dry. Otherwise, you're out of business.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, let's
and also television.
Well, I was just going to say, let's drill down a little bit on that, because you were saying about garbage bags and gaffer tape. Do you mean, so literally you take the garbage bags and you just, cut holes for the lens, wrap it around the camera, use your gaffer tape to sort of keep it all sealed? Is that essentially what you mean?
Yes, and that's often over your specialized camera gear. I sort of collect those type of things because you can never have enough. Setting a tripod down in floodwater 4 feet high ain't good with a tripod. But I've had to do it.
Yeah.
You can never have enough trash bags. I mean, I have wrapped everything from cameras to laptops to all kinds of gear. It's awfully hard to shoot in it when it's just a big bundle of plastic with one lens sticking out of one end and a viewfinder sticking out of the other. But those are the only options you have. It's really hard to make art or attempt to when it's raining up your nose.
Yeah.
And very often during a hurricane, the rain is so hard it hurts, it stings. And it's very easy to go out there and within 30 seconds have everything so wet you're no good. So um, it's all a matter of staying dry and learning where to do that, whether it be, you learn to look for overhangs and places where you can seek shelter and still shoot video. Cameras are so small these days, though. That's really going to go by the wayside. I mean, imagine, you could with GoPros and smartphones. We were covering the tropical storm Irma, which had been a hurricane a couple days before in Charleston, and some of the best stuff we got was from our reporter's cell phone. We were driving along, and there was a transmitter on a telephone pole shortening out and throwing sparks, and he wanted me to shoot it. And I said, well, give me a second or two because I got to park the car, get the gear, get out and shoot it. And before I could finish that sentence, he's got his smartphone up, records great shots of this thing, throwing sparks until it eventually blows in a sort of a whiteout. And that was prominent in our coverage that night. So it's getting easier than ever before with new cameras and smaller cameras and cell phone technology.
Yeah.
But it's very easy to lose focus of the periphery and your personal safety and getting so sucked into that little screen in front of you. I think that's my biggest advice would be, understand that you're not immortal, you're not bulletproof, and you can very easily get hurt